shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia. My name's Larry. Well, today's project, and it's really going to be a project that's going to spread out over some time. Today is December 17th, 2017. You probably all won't see this video until after the first of the year. And here's the reason. I have this beautiful mid-century modern dining room set that we bought this summer, and it's finally time for it to get touched up, polished up, and put out for sale. Now, the mall that my wife sells in and the place that we put our high-end furniture is moving. So right after Christmas, we have to pack up 5 gigantic booths worth of stuff and move it to the new store. When we land there, my wife wants to have this ready to go, so I'm under a little bit of a time constraint to get it done. Now what this is a mid-century dining set made by White Furniture in the 1950s. We picked it up this summer at an estate sale for a very low price. We happened to be first through the door. We saw it, asked about it, and bought it. And it's big and I'm limited in space, so it's basically been broken down and stored inside our house till I had a chance to get to it. Well, the chance has come. It's time for me to get to work. So we'll be doing this in sections. The first section is going to be the chairs, then the table, then the china cabinet, and the buffet. Each piece being done separately because we only have so much room and I can't jam an entire dining set into this little shop and be able to work. Now, it's in really good shape, so what we're going to be doing is mostly touching up and polishing up and fixing little chips and dings. All things that you've seen me do in other videos, mostly on lower end pieces of furniture. Now I made one video about a year ago and I think it was called High-End Touch-Ups Are Legit Too. It was terrible. If you haven't seen it, I don't blame you because it was one of the worst videos I ever shot. I shot it with the camera, the autofocus was acting up, the light was terrible, the white balance was off, and I had blazing sun coming through the window. I swear I don't know what I was thinking when I published it, but I did. But the point of what I'm trying to get at is this. When it's done, it's going to be a multi-thousand-dollar dining set. So we need to get it so it's fixed and it looks good and it looks old. And the techniques that I'm going to use to make that happen are the same ones I've been using all along on the lower end furniture. That lower end furniture over the years has been how I perfected the techniques and perfected my skills so that I can apply those things to a set like this. We don't want to refinish it. We don't have to refinish it. We're just going to take care of issues. Color issues, chips on the legs, dog bites, loose joints in chairs, a tabletop that needs to be repolished. Little things like that. So what I'm going to do is break this down into a series of sections. We'll start with the chairs. I'll bring you in for a sample of each little repair that I do to them. For example, I'll show you one color touch-up, one joint tightening, and I'll refer you back to videos that show more extensive use of those techniques. For example, we just did that high-backed oak chair. You saw me tighten up joints in that. I used a little bit of detail there. Same thing with color touch-up. There's a whole scene in that video of color touch-ups. So we'll rip through this. So today I'm going to do the chairs. When the chairs are done, I'm going to bring in the table. The table's done, etc., etc., etc. And hopefully I'll have this all done by the time it's time to move into the new mall. And once it's set up in that booth, then I can shoot the final shot for you. You can see what it looks like, because I just don't have room here to set up another dining room set. So stick with us. We're going to get started on these chairs. This ought to be fun. And for those of you that love mid-century modern furniture, excuse me, this one's for you because this set is really pretty. We'll see you in just a sec. I've got the back off and the seat off the first chair, and you can see already that we've got some joint issues on these chairs. These legs are loose. They're loose in the stretchers, they're loose on the sides. So what we're going to do is blow this chair apart, taking off these cross braces, of course, and then we'll work any of these loose joints apart, clean them up, and re-glue them as you've seen me do in the past. I'll show you how I got this marked up here in just a second. And unless you're real good at putting together puzzles, which I am not, and have a real good memory, which I don't, you find that if you mark these pieces now, you'll save yourself much aggravation in the future. What I do is mark each leg, and then I mark the parts that are going to match that numbered leg all the same, so that I know now that this piece, when I get it back together, this 4 is going into leg 4, and this cross brace is for the corner of leg 4, and this piece is going into leg 4, and this stretcher is going into leg 4, and it allows me to put the piece together without any problems. So right now I've got to blow apart all these cross pieces and then start pulling these joints apart that need to come apart, clean them up and reglue them. One of the things we often talk about when we're dealing with chair joints is the risk to damaging the chair trying to disassemble and otherwise, well, trying to disassemble a loose joint. And on this leg we have this example perfectly illustrated here. We're loose here at this stretcher. We were mildly loose at this joint. I don't believe I did this because I didn't tap it hard enough, but as I began to tap the center of this cross piece out to see if this joint would come loose, we discovered this huge split in this leg. It is all the way through on the other side and comes all the way up about 4 inches, actually up to here. And probably what happened is this joint was loose and somebody sat in it and pushed it back and it cracked. Let me flip this over and show you just how bad this is. And look at this. It is right through the entire piece, corner joint of this leg. And I tell you, I did not notice it when we first started, and if that thing split like that with the little taps I was giving it with a rubber mallet in the center like this, we're lucky we caught it because that thing would have exploded if somebody sat on it. So what we're going to do, if that's what we're up against in this project, is do everything that we can do to keep from having to try to take these chairs apart, because I can't have this kind of explosion every time I start to tap on a joint. So what I'm going to do is force glue down into this from every angle, get this pulled back together and clamped up tight, get some glue into this one here, and we're going to move forward. But this is what can happen when you start to disassemble old furniture, and it's nothing that can't be fixed, but you've just got to weigh, is it worth the satisfaction of you getting that joint all the way apart so you can tell your buddies that's what you did, or should you just try to force some glue in there and get it back together in a satisfactory manner and not risk this kind of damage to the chair? I'll bring you back. That's how far I was able to get that stretcher pulled back. I've got this joint open pretty well, so I should be able to get a ton of glue down inside of there, and we'll get that repaired. But hey, it's old furniture, surprise, surprise. We'll get by it, we'll move on. Okay, we've got this glued up as best we can. This joint here is pulled together nice and tight, nice and even. I've got this quick grip clamp on here to keep it nice and tight. Got a band clamp wrapped around the seat that pulls the joint this way. An additional clamp here to pull the top of the joint in. You can see it's actually squeezing glue out after I've cleaned it, so that is nice and tight. And then for this loose stretcher here, we have a band clamp around it, and for the loose stretcher here, we have another band clamp around it. That should take care of everything that was wiggling on this chair. That was an unpleasant surprise and not the most auspicious start to the project, but it's part of the game. So I will move on, and if I have any additional repairs that are unusual, I'll bring you back and show them to you. I'm on the 5th chair, and the repairs have been as we expected. But I've discovered as I've been working on the chair that somebody has worked on these ahead of me, and whoever did it was it wasn't a homeowner. This guy knew what he was doing. The lady had said the table had been professionally refinished, and it looks like the chairs may have been worked on as well. But I want to show you an interesting repair. If you look at the top of this leg, you can see this split, very much like the split we just dealt with. And whoever repaired this very carefully drilled these very thin holes into that break to inject glue or some adhesive in there to hold it together. And you can see the crack in the leg, but you can also see the evidence of the repairs, which is kind of refreshing to see. I found a couple of drips. I hope it's not polyurethane. I'm assuming it is, but perhaps it was just touched up. But we'll keep moving forward, and I'll bring you back when I find something else interesting. Cool repair. Well, it's been about 3.5 hours actually to get all these chairs cleaned and glued up. Each of them have different repairs, different clamping schedules. Because of the shapes of the chairs, I found that the band clamps work the best. But there's not, the only one actually that didn't need any repairs was that one armchair. But all the rest of them were loose in various joints. So we're going to let this glue set up, and we'll come back and we'll start color touch-ups. As you can see, we've got quite a little bit of work to do on almost every chair. Good morning. It's a foggy, damp morning here in North Georgia. Let's get in the shop and see how we did. If you can remember, this is the leg that had split completely apart, and you can see now it's rock solid. Barely can see the crack joint here. Be able to touch that up a little bit where it needs with some color. But you can see how nicely that came together. So that's great. Chairs are solid so far. We'll keep going. I got about 3 more to unwrap. Get the shop cleaned up, and we'll move on to coloring. And we're moving on to the first stage of color touch-up. And what I've got is some dye stain. This is Mohawk's Perfect Brown, which I've found is a pretty good color for this light brown walnut. The medium brown walnut that I normally use on walnut pieces tends to be a little bit too red. This is more towards the raw umber side of brown. So the Perfect Brown seems to be a pretty good match. But just touch up right here, what I've done is mixed some of that dye stain 50-50 with some acetone to tone it down just a little bit, give me a little bit more control. And I just dip it into the dye and apply it. And then depending on how it reacts, I work it in or leave it be or whatever. And that's how it looks. I'm going to leave it a little bit light because that's a natural wear spot. And the bottom part of this leg had the finish worn off from about here to here. So what I've done is just dip this rag into my color, into my dye. And I'm just going to gently wipe it on. I've got very little color on here. And you can see how that's blending in the damage to the surrounding area. There you go. And once I have the color where I want, take a little bit of clear lacquer and just shoot a light coat over it and seal it in. That's it. That's all there is to it. We've got the color touch-ups done on all 6 chairs. Basically all we did was blend in all the damage that was done to the finish at the bottoms of the legs using dye stains and lacquers, and those are taken care of. We touched up any obvious chips or defects that were in the body of the chair, but we left a lot of the different tonalities and things because we want these to look what they are, and that's 70 or 80 years old. So the next thing we're going to do is apply scratch cover, and then once the scratch cover has a chance to dry, we're going to wax these chairs, we'll put them back together, and they'll be done. And when I apply scratch cover on a project like this, I use a little bit of 4/0 steel wool, and then I transfer the scratch cover into these squeeze bottles, because the bottles they come in drive me insane. They're like a drip bottle. I'd hang myself before I could use it for an hour. Anyways, I use Old English brand scratch cover dark. It's basically an oil with a stain in it. You just apply it. I just apply it to my rag. I'm sorry. I apply it to my 4/0 steel wool, and then just gently work it in. And what it's going to do is cover up any little scratches simply by coloring them in. Then I just take a rag and wipe off the excess. That's all there is to it. And we've got this chair with its first, well actually with its coat of scratch cover on it and wiped off. I hope you can see how nice that makes the chair look. Takes care of any little scratches, darkens up any of the little light spots a little bit, and gives it a nice little luster. We'll let this set for a while, and then we'll wax over top of this, and this will be done. But this is looking real good. Looks period correct, but well taken care of, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. All right, 5 more to go. Bring you back. Time to wax. I use Howard's Feed and Wax. I've had pretty good luck with it. It goes on easy and does a nice job shining things up. I'm applying it today just with a microfiber towel that's pretty well saturated with Howard's Feed and Wax, and I'm just rubbing it onto the piece, and we'll let it set for 10 or 15 minutes and buff it off, and then these chairs are done. We'll let them set up for a little while, we'll buff them off and reinstall the seats and the seat backs, and these chairs are done. And with another clean microfiber cloth, I just buff off the wax. And I'll show you how I reinstall the seats. When I took the seats off, the seats were marked, so I knew which chair they came from. You can see that's chair number 6 right there. And then I also broke the hardware down so the screws go back on the chairs they came off of. You can see the original screws were these slot heads, and over the years they've been replaced with a number of Phillips heads. But there's our screws for chair 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I just put the seat on for 6. What I do is get the seat positioned, and I use some quick grip clamps to hold it on with, and then let me walk you over here. And I run the screws into the seat. You can use a drill. I'm going to need 2 hands to do this, but you can use a drill if you want. I usually don't like doing that. I like to feel it going in, but either way is fine. So let me get these seats on. I'll get the backs in, and then we'll show you what the chairs came out like. Well, here we go. The chairs are all done. We got all the loose joints taken care of. That shattered leg has been repaired. We got color touch-ups done. We use scratch cover and wax to buff up the finish a little bit. I think they look great. They look old, they look well cared for, and they have a nice patina and a nice mellow glow to them, which is exactly what we wanted to do. I do hate the seat covers on them. That pattern is hideous. It does nothing for the chairs. But like I said before, we're going to let the new owner decide what they want to do with it. So the chairs are done. I'm going to go put these back in the house. The next step is to drag that table out here, figure out what we're going to do with that tabletop. Well, good morning. It's a rainy, dreary day here in North Georgia. Forecast calls for storms all day and quite a little bit of rain. Abby and Stewie don't seem to mind, but we've got some issues in the shop we need to address. Come on inside, let's figure them out. Here's the next part of our project. It's the table with 2 leaves that goes with that set. It's about 8.5 feet long. It's a monster. It looks to be in great shape from afar, but let's talk about this just a little bit. I want you to take a look at some of these scratches that I'm finding on this table, and you can see they're fairly deep. I can just barely catch my fingernail on that one. And they're all over the table, almost like someone had stored something on top of the table and dragged it off. There's scratches on the leaves, which, by the way, the color has faded on the table and the leaves no longer match. And over here we have a couple of dents that are pretty deep and need to be steamed up or filled in before we can really do a good job on this. Here's another one right here. Let's talk about how we're going to handle this. My initial plan for this table was to light sand it, wet sand it, and polish it. When I got it in the shop and took a look at it, I discovered 2 things. Number one, it's finished in polyurethane, which means that I can't use any of my lacquer tricks on this. I'm going to have to stick with polyurethane. The second issue is that the scratches and the dents are too deep to sand out without taking effectively all of this finish off this table. And even if I get it down to the last layer of polyurethane, because polyurethane and lacquer don't get along very well, I'm going to have to refinish this with polyurethane. And with polyurethane comes long dry times, lots of inclusions from dust in the air while the finish stays wet. Plus I can't use the tricks for coloring and toning quite as easily as I can when I use lacquer. So much to my chagrin, I've decided this table is going to get completely stripped and completely refinished. This thing's a monster. It's 8.5 feet long. It's going to take some time. But it's one of those decisions that is difficult to make, but it has to be made because we don't want this tabletop to look awful. We got to remember it's been refinished once, so any sanding that we do to the veneer has to be very, very carefully done. We don't know how much veneer is left. And we'll do our steaming and our fills, whatever we have to do, very judiciously, and then we'll get back to refinishing it. So anyways, for the next couple of hours, I'm going to have to strip this beast off, so I will bring you back when I'm done. Okay, the table's been stripped. It's been rinsed with both lacquer thinner and mineral spirits and wiped off with some water. The finish was extremely stubborn. There's a lot of finish that's still deep in the wood that's going to have to come up when I sand. If you can try to shoot you in the glare, but you can see here all this shiny stuff is finished. It just won't come out. I put enough stripper on here to sink a battleship, and I'm just going to have to sand out what's left. But we'll let this dry off real good, then we'll start sanding it and get it ready to refinish. Okay, here she is. She's all stripped. She's been sanded down with 220. Almost all of the scratches and dents came out with the sanding. The veneer appears to be in really good shape. I've got it wet down right now with some mineral spirits, wiping off the last of the dust, and taking a look at the color, and you can see that the color is pretty much in the wood. It's a natural finish. This is walnut, and I believe this banding is mahogany. But I don't think this is going to need too much color. I think a couple of seal coats and maybe a light glaze coat, and we'll be okay color-wise. I've got one coat of sealer on it, and it was a difficult coat because of the moisture in the air. It wasn't raining when I put it on, but it started raining shortly thereafter. We had a lot of blush. So it's right now it is just pouring out. You can see the water pouring down the driveway. It just doesn't make any sense to shoot a second coat of anything on this right now. It's just too humid outside. So we'll get back up on this tomorrow, but so far it's looking pretty good. Well, good morning. It finally stopped raining. It's still wet out here, as you can see, but the wind's starting to blow, and I think it's starting to clear off, which is nice. It's been raining for about 3 days straight. We got one little issue in the shop we got to address this morning. Come on inside and we'll talk about it. Well, we've got the second coat of sealer on the table, and it's looking really, really good. I'm very, very happy with the surface. I'm very happy with the way it's coming out. We have this leaf here, excuse me, that, as you know, right from the get-go was a different color than the rest of the table. It's very much a brown towards a raw umber brown, a greenish side of brown, while these have a whole lot more red in them. 1, 2, these 3 sections. I know in the camera this one looks more brown, but believe me, it matches the rest of the table. This is the odd man out. So the question became, what do? Do we make these match this? Do we make this match those? And what about the chair? We have one of the chairs over there. I'll show you here in a minute. And what we decided to do is to try to redden this one up, because even though this is redder than the chair, it matches the apron and the legs, and the tones in the chair match the red. So what we're going to try to do is redden this up a little bit. Now let me swing you around now and I'll show you what I mean. And you can see how brown this is compared to these. And here's the chair. And if you look at the wood, and it's tough because the white balance in the camera is not exact, this and this would match fine. If we try to match this, we're going to have to really darken the brown up. So that's a decision that we made. I'm not the best with color. I can't match my socks in the morning, and I'm sure there's someone who could look at this and in 3 seconds have a dead even match. I'm not that guy. So I'm just trying to share with you the thought process that I go through when I come up with an issue like this. So if maybe you have one at your home on your project, you have a better idea how you want to handle it, whatever. But anyways, the next question is, how are we going to redden this up? Let me show you. I took a piece of clear glass and I smeared a little bit of 3 different colored glazes on the glass so you can see the color differences. This is raw umber, and as I said before, raw umber is the greener side of brown. This here is Van Dyke brown. Van Dyke brown tends to be what I use when I'm working on walnut. And then this is burnt umber. Burnt umber is the redder side of brown. So we have green, a little bit more red, and a lot more red. So the question then becomes, which one should I use if I'm going to try to do my first color adjustment with glaze? And if you lay the pieces, the glass on top, you can see that, and again, this is opaque, so you're going to have to look by that. But I think this is going to be too brown and not give us enough red and darken this up too much. And this one here, is this burnt umber, I think is going to give us the most red for the thinnest coat, because we can't get this very much darker because it's already about the same darkness as the other stuff. So we want to get it red without getting it dark. Now the other option, of course, is to shoot a toner on it. But again, we're going to do this as a first step and see how we do. So that's what I decided to do. This probably wasn't the best way of illustrating it, but I'm going to take this leaf off and put a thin coat of burnt umber glaze on it and see if we can get it red. Now remember, because this has been sealed, if the burnt umber glaze looks terrible on it, I just wipe it off with some mineral spirits and we'll use toners instead. So stand by, let's see how we do. Okay, here we go. Remember, nice light coat. We've basically taken almost all of it off. We're just going to leave a light film of it, and mostly it's going to be what settles in the grain. Okay, you can see we're very, very close with that. The only thing I'm not happy about is this banding. It's a little dark. So what I'm going to do is just take some mineral spirits, put it on a rag, and then just work up to the edge of this banding and pull some of this glaze out of there. Okay, it's tough to see the light. That one on the left isn't as light as it looks in the camera, but you can see these two are much, much closer than they were. So I'm going to play around with this a little bit and let the glaze dry, and then we'll move on. But we've pulled that a whole lot closer with that glaze application, and it honestly in person looks pretty good. So let me get to it. You can see the color match between the leaves. Pretty good. I think we're pretty close. Try to get the glare off that one side. But there we are. We'll get a couple of coats of lacquer on it, and if we have any minor toning touch-ups, we can just use some colored toner, of course. But I think we're real close right now. So we're going to give this a couple hours to dry, and then we'll start shooting lacquer on it. Our first coat of lacquer is on our table and on both the leaves. We'll give it an hour or two to set up. Come in here, rub it down with some steel wool, clean them off, and shoot a second coat. Second coat of lacquer is on. Color's looking really good. That gets a thumbs up. Well, I got in the shop early this morning and flipped this table on its top, and then I fixed the legs just the same way as I did with the chair, touched up the color and all. Then I put it back on its legs and wet sanded the top, and also the wet sanded the leaves as well, and then shot a final coat of lacquer on them, and you can see how nice they came out. The color match is good, as we showed in the last scene. The finish is good, nice and smooth. The table looks great. So listen, this is going to end it for part one of this video. I will bring you back for part two, and we'll take care of the buffet and the two-piece china cabinet. So anyways, from our shop just outside Kennesaw here in North Georgia. Best regards, thanks for watching. Take good care. We'll see you next video, which will be part two of the restoration of this dining set. This worked out good. We'll see you soon. Bye.